It is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. And I want you to imagine you are the mayor of New York City for a second.
Okay.
You walk into your office at City Hall, you open the city's digital ledger, and your stomach just drops. You are not just looking at red ink, you are staring into a black hole.
And it is a deep one. A
Yeah.
$10 billion black hole.
Exactly. You have a $10.4 billion deficit staring you in the face for next year. And you've got, what, two options?
Two really bad options.
Option A, you go to war with the governor to tax billionaires. Option B, you do something that hasn't been done in 20 years. You hit the nuclear button and raise property taxes on everyone.
It's the ultimate political choose-your-own-adventure, but both endings are pretty grim.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are digging into NYC's fiscal cliff. We've got a whole stack of reports here on the desk. We're looking at the raw numbers from Comptroller Mark Levine, a pretty scorching critique from the Western Journal on city mismanagement, and this fascinating kind of radical proposal from the Community Service Society.
The land value tax. It sounds so academic, but it might be the only way to really stop the bleeding.
We are going to get there. But first, we have to understand why the city is holding a grenade with the pin pulled out. Because it's not just about money, right?
No, not at all. It's about trust.
And trust is at an all-time low.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the crisis right now, the ultimatum. Mayor Zohran Mamdani has drawn the line in the sand with Albany. What's the scenario?
Well, to really get the standoff, you have to look at the math. And Comptroller Levine's report is, it's sobering.
Yeah.
He projects a gap of $2.2 billion for this fiscal year, the one ending in June.
Okay, but that's just the appetizer.
That's just the appetizer.
Yeah.
The main course is fiscal year 2027.
And that's where the $10.4 billion number comes from.
Right. And to give that some context, we have not seen a gap this big, this late in the year, since the Great Recession.
Wow.
This isn't a rounding error. This is a structural collapse.
Okay, but I have to play skeptic for a minute. New York's budget is bigger than most countries. How do you just find a $10 billion hole?
It's a great question.
Like, did we lose the receipt? How does this even happen?
Levine's report points to something called chronic underbudgeting, which is, a very polite way of saying the previous administration was playing games with the numbers.
Cooking the books?
Legally, maybe, but deceptively. They were ignoring expenses they knew were coming.
Like what?
Things like rental assistance, overtime for police, shelter costs. These happen every single year. They're recurring, but they weren't put in the budget.
So they were treated as one-offs.
Exactly, like they were hoping federal aid or some kind of miracle would just cover it.
So it's like, I plan my household budget, but I just pretend I don't have to buy groceries.
That's a perfect analogy. You pretend the grocery bill is zero, your spreadsheet looks great, but eventually you have to eat. And now the bill has arrived.
And Mayor Mamdani's holding that bill.
Yeah.
So he goes to Governor Hochul and says,
"Let me tax the rich." Specifically, he wants to raise personal income taxes on high earners and also corporate taxes.
and Hochul's response.
She is not biting.
Yeah.
There's a real fear of capital flight.
Yeah.
Wealthy people just leaving the state if taxes go up again. So she's pushing back.
Which brings us to the nuclear option.
The property tax hike.
Yeah.
This is Mamdani's leverage. He's saying, okay, Governor, if you won't let me tax the wealthy, I am forced to tax the property of everyone.
A 9.5% across the board hike.
9.5%. That's massive.
It's huge.
We haven't seen a hike like that since 2003, under Bloomberg, right after 9/11.
And the reaction, we've got this article from the Western Journal. They are not holding back.
No, they see it as the predictable failure of a democratic socialist administration.
Mm-hmm.
But their core argument is really about competence.
Right. They bring up the snowstorm.
It's hard to forget. The city shut down, trash wasn't picked up for a week, and the argument from the right is, you spend $127 billion a year, you can't even plow the streets, and now you want 10% more.
It's the value for money argument.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
It breaks that social contract. You pay taxes, you get services.
Mm-hmm.
When the services fail, people get angry.
And it's not just them. Even the comptroller, Mark Levine, called the hike a pretty extreme option.
He did. He knows hitting homeowners right now is political suicide. But here's the twist.
Okay.
This is why I was so interested in this. Because on the surface, it's a tax versus spend fight. But when you dig into this report from the Community Service Society, you realize the property tax system itself is, broken isn't a strong enough word.
Rigged.
Rigged is a good word. It's opaque and, you could argue, discriminatory.
So let's talk about that, the effective tax rate. Because when the mayor says 9%, We think everyone pays that increase equally.
But they don't start from the same place. Not even close.
This is the real aha moment.
It is. This is where you see how the burden is hidden. Okay, so effective tax rate, or ETR. That's the percent of your property's actual market value you pay in taxes.
What I could sell it for today.
Right. So if you own a single-family home, a brownstone in Park Slope, a house in Staten Island, your ETR is incredibly low, somewhere between 0.7% and maybe 3%.
Okay, very low.
Extremely low. Now, look at rental properties, big apartment buildings, where most New Yorkers live.
Yeah.
Their effective tax rate is around 4.3%.
Oh.
Or even higher.
Wait, so the apartment building is taxed at a rate almost 5 times higher than the private home?
Yes. The tax code heavily favors homeowners over renters.
But I don't pay property tax. I'm a renter. I just pay my landlord.
You don't get the bill, but you are paying the check. Landlords bake that tax right into your rent.
So a huge chunk of my rent is just pass-through property tax.
It can be, sometimes 20 or 30%. So what you have is a system where working-class renters are effectively subsidizing low tax rates for million-dollar homeowners.
And the CSS report says it gets worse when you layer on race.
It does. They found that predominantly black neighborhoods have higher effective tax rates than whiter, wealthier ones.
How is that even legally possible?
It's not explicit. It's structural. It all comes down to something called assessment caps.
Okay, walk me through that.
So back in the 80s, the state passed a law to protect homeowners. It caps how much the taxable value of a home can go up each year. Let's say it's capped at 6%.
That sounds good in theory.
In theory. But imagine you bought a brownstone in 1995 for $200,000. Today it's worth $4 million.
Right.
The market value exploded. But because of that cap, your taxable value only inched up a tiny bit each year.
So I'm paying taxes as if my house is still worth a fraction of its real value.
Exactly. Meanwhile, big rental buildings don't get that same sweet deal. Their assessments rise much closer to market value.
It's like rent control, but for the tax bills of the wealthy.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it explains the racial disparity. In neighborhoods where values shot up, the gap between market and taxable value is huge. In less wealthy neighborhoods, the assessment is closer to reality, so paradoxically, they pay a higher rate.
So when the mayor threatens this hike, he's just amplifying the inequity.
He's cranking up the volume on a broken stereo. A 9.5% hike on someone paying 0.7% is annoying. A hike on a building paying 4.3%, that's catastrophic.
This sounds hopeless.
Which brings us to the radical idea. The third way.
A land value tax.
From the CSS report. And look, it sounds like something from an old economics textbook.
It kind of does.
But modern economists are obsessed with it. And the premise is simple.
Tax the dirt, not the building.
Correct. Right now, we tax improvements. You own a vacant lot, your taxes are super low. You build a 50-unit apartment building on it, your taxes skyrocket.
So we fine you for building housing.
We punish the behavior we want housing, and we reward the behavior we don't. Speculation.
Explain the speculation part.
Okay, so you're a speculator. You buy a plot of land, you don't build, you just sit on it for 10 years waiting for the price to go up.
And the city basically charges you pennies to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But under land value tax, or LVT, the assessor looks at that lot and says, we don't care that it's empty. We care that it's in a prime location. The land is what's valuable.
So the tax is the same whether it's a dirt lot or a skyscraper?
Yes, based on the potential of the location.
Whoa. So if I'm that speculator, my tax bill just went from pennies to millions.
Overnight. And suddenly you can't afford to let it sit empty. You are bleeding cash.
Yeah.
You either build something to generate income or you sell to someone who will.
It weaponizes the tax code to force development.
It aligns the profit motive with the public good.
Yeah.
You stop taxing the bricks and windows, which makes housing cheaper, and you tax the monopoly on the location.
Which also touches on tax abatements, right? Things like 485X.
Well, these huge tax breaks. The city basically has to bribe developers saying, please build housing, and we promise not to tax you for 35 years.
And with LVT, you don't need the bribe.
Exactly. The incentive is baked in. You build because it's the only way to cover the high land tax.
It sounds incredibly logical, almost too logical. So I have to ask, if this is a silver bullet, why hasn't it been done?
Because there are losers, and the losers vote.
Let's talk about the counter-arguments. What would the Western Journal say?
Well, first, conservatives would argue this doesn't solve the spending problem. If the city is inefficient, changing the tax type is just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Fair point. If the bucket has a hole, it doesn't matter how you fill it.
Exactly. But there's also the grandma problem.
I was just thinking about that, the elderly homeowner in Queens.
Right. A retired widow on a fixed income. Her house is small, but her land is now incredibly valuable.
Under the current system, her taxes are capped.
But under a pure LVT, her taxes could triple because she's underutilizing the land. The market says she should sell, but humanity says that's her home.
That is the third rail of politics.
It is, which is why the report suggests things like circuit breakers, where you defer the tax until the property is sold.
It sounds complicated.
It is. And Mayor Mamdani doesn't have time for complicated. He has a $10 billion hole now. LVT is a 5-year project.
So the LVT is the dream, but the 9.5% hike is the reality.
That's the tragedy of it. You can't pay next week's bills with a 5-year plan.
So we're back to the game of chicken.
We are. The mayor is threatening to raid the city's rainy day fund. Almost $1 billion.
Which you're supposed to save for a real recession.
Not for your own failure to budget, right?
It feels like watching a slow-motion car crash. You have the right yelling about mismanagement, the left yelling about a rigged system, and the mayor threatening to drive off a cliff.
Yeah, and in the middle of all that noise, the average New Yorker is just hoping their trash gets picked up.
And hoping their rent doesn't go up another 10%.
Which, if this tax hike goes through, it almost certainly will.
So let's wrap this up. We have a massive deficit, a broken tax system, and this radical idea to tax the ground itself.
It's a perfect storm. It exposes every single crack in the city's foundation. And whether you think the solution is cutting spending or rewriting the tax code,
Everyone agrees on one thing.